So thank you for joining us tonight. It is a real pleasure uh, to host you in our first day of the event, The Power of the Hashtag. And it brings a very important topic as we see for youth all over the world, and that is, can technology solve some of the most pressing social issues today? As young European ambassadors, we believe that it is important for our peers to hear the views and opinions of European young leaders such as yourself, and hopefully get inspired to pursue their own goals. For those of us watching now, Hera Hussain is a really amazing young woman, actually, whose life work symbolizes everything we as ambassadors are striving for, actually. So, doing good, being active, spreading the word, and becoming a voice that truly matters.
Thank
You
you
are
so much. Those are some kind words.
yes, of course. And we as ambassadors are really close to your work. And personally, I was really impressed by your work since you're a social entrepreneur actually, who founded the international platform CHAYM. And you got recognized by Forbes and MIT under 35 as one of the most influential young world leaders, as I'm correct, right?
Yes, innovative rather than influential. You can be innovative and then not be influential, and influential but not innovative.
Okay. It is important either way. So the chain, actually, the platform actively contributes to the community by crowdsourcing online resources to address gender-based violence. And you reached actually more than 380,000 people in the last years all over the world. And that is really impressive. And when you're not busy chain, you are passionate about empowering women, and you're a true believer in the power of open source technology and open data as a way to fight and to solve the world's most pressing issues. So, enough of the introduction. For now, I would like to continue with the first question, which actually would like to be for your personal background. I know that you were impacted by different cultures from different continents since you were born in the United Kingdom, then grew up in Pakistan, and moved back again in the UK for your studies. Do you think that this influenced you to become who you are today?
Absolutely. I think my upbringing in Pakistan was so helpful in so many different ways. Come from a very close and big family, especially on my mother's side, lots of female role models, doctors, teachers. My grandmother had her own school. And I grew up in a very happy home, but I knew that people around me, that wasn't the case for everyone. And also, when you grow up in a patriarchal society, like most countries, but especially in Pakistan, society reminds you of the fact that you're a woman. So all the way from like what kind of subjects you should take in school, whether you go to school or not, even those things might not have affected me personally. Those are the conversations you would hear all the time around you, from friends, from relatives. And gender-based violence, domestic abuse, sexual harassment, assault, forced marriage, these are the kind of things that were very much part and parcel of just existence. So it's those things. I always wanted to do something around women's empowerment. And coming back to the UK, I really thought when I came to the UK, I was like, well, I've always been told that Europe is really good for women's rights, and the UK especially. And I was very surprised that there were so many challenges that women face in a country like the United Kingdom as well. And in my later travels and work with Jen across different parts of Europe, that the problem of patriarchy is a global one, and how it manifests itself in everyday interactions or the bigger things that can be different, and also the way society supports women in those issues can be different, but the problems are very much similar. So we're stuck in the same toxic patriarchal system.
Yes, I can definitely agree with you on this because even I'm coming from the Balkans, which is located in Europe. We still have a lot of issues based. We have a lot of divisions based on gender. And my grandmother told me stories, and my mother told me stories how they were discriminated in a way, how they couldn't go to educate themselves further because they were women and the parents didn't want to let them go. And even though a lot of time has passed and we have developed a lot in the last decades, but even now we can see that the difference is still here. Maybe not that extreme as before, but it's still present. Even though we're in Europe, let's say in the more developed continent, more developed countries, but still it's here.
Absolutely.
I would like to continue to CHAYM and to your work as a social entrepreneur. I was really impressed again to learn that you founded your startup back in 2013. I know that this kind of social enterprises weren't really popular or attractive for investments or for gathering a lot of people. So I'm interested, how did you come up with the idea in the first place, and how hard was it to establish the whole platform?
Yeah, great question. So I always wanted to do something around women's rights, but I wasn't really sure what it was going to be. So when I was at university in Glasgow, I got involved in a lot of entrepreneurship activities, and then I got into the tech scene in the UK. So I attended lots of hackathons. At that time, they were really popular, and realized that actually I was quite entrepreneurial. But very quickly, I kind of became quite bored and just felt meaningless to work on tech startups that just, it didn't create the social value or change that excited me and that was important to me. So I started thinking of different ideas. I thought, well, maybe I love fashion. So I was like, maybe I can start a fashion like social enterprise, and that can, have a connection with women's rights. So I pitched lots of business competitions and startup competitions, and I would like always make it to the semifinals or finals, and then I would just like never win because they would be like, there's no sustainability plan. So we really like your idea, we love your passion, but there's no way to make no profit from this. So I was like, okay. And then I got introduced to social entrepreneurship, and I started attending lots of events and learning from different social entrepreneurs and how they were, creating a merger between profit making businesses and like taking the best out of the private sector and really putting the third sector or the charity sectors like aims together. And it felt like that was more sustainable. But something I was very aware of was that lots of charities shut down because of lack of funding. Lots of social enterprises shut down because of lack of funding. So CHAYM happened by accident because I was helping two friends very close to me get out of abusive marriages. And I realized that when we were looking online to find support as a young person, that was just natural to do. But the web was just barren. There was just a very few websites, mostly based in the UK and US. They were all in English, and then they would have like translations for different languages, like hidden away in PDFs. So they were not even searchable by Google. So like most search engines wouldn't find them. And I just thought the way the UX, the look, feel, the way the information was organized was very much focused on the organizations. Like, this is our press page. These are our research reports. As someone looking for information, like with survivors, it was just like, it was so hard. It was like 20, 30 clicks before you got to something that was that was useful or relevant. So that kicked something off in my head, and I was like, you know what, there's something here. So I attended a business model hackathon. Actually, it was my first one. I had always attended hackathons, but never a business model hackathon, in which we worked with charities and social enterprises. And that really inspired me. So when I went home from that weekend, I was staying over with my friend, and I was like, you know what, I should do something about it. So in the next morning, I woke up, I went to my friend's office, and she worked in this like financial tech incubator and accelerator in like London's financial district. And I sat in what's like the heart of capitalism, and sat down and then drew what became the first like website for CHAYM. And I thought, you know what, I'm just gonna, I never want CHAYM to not be around because there's no funding. So I decided that CHAYM sustainability was going to be that it's a volunteer-led community, and that if we can, make a commercial like layer on top of it, or we can get funding to work on like deeper projects, great. But if we don't have that, still it should be fine. Like the organization would keep running.
That is really amazing. And my next question is actually on that point. CHAYM is run by more than 400 volunteers from 15 different countries, right?
Yep.
So it is definitely an amazing achievement, and most of them are survivors of domestic violence or sexual harassment as
Yeah.
well. So, how do you motivate the volunteers to stay active for a longer period? For example, we know that I'm personally, I'm engaged in the civil society sector. I have my own organization. So basically, I have volunteered a lot and I have done a lot of activities and projects that even I wasn't paid for. So basically, I understand that volunteering is one part of a young man's life, and it should be a very important part of one young person's life. But how do you motivate them? Do you keep them going for a longer period? Because once you, let's say, go to the real life, you need to have finances, you need to get your own place, and in a way, have a more sustainable way of living.
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, something I had to learn by trial. I also am a serial volunteer. I still volunteer for other organizations and other things. The way I thought about it is that, first of all, people who've experienced abuse, they don't need any motivation. They have all the motivation in their experiences. But we wanted to come up with we tested different models for organizing the volunteers, and the way we do it right now works really well. So we run on 4-month cycles. So think of it like a sprint. So it's like 4 months. It's called a cycle, but in those 4 months, we decide what we're going to do. We invite volunteers to, like, say they're available for that, or if they're applying fresh, they're allowed in. We only allow 30 to 40 people for one cycle. And that cycle has very definite goals, and everybody works together in like teams, and we have regular weekly calls. Sometimes different projects will have different calls during the week as well. And then the idea is that at the end of the cycle, so at the end of the 4 months, people can say, okay, I need a break, or someone's maybe getting married, something else is happening. They're like, I just need some time off. And then they can tap back in at the start of another cycle. So that means people have room to kind of, contribute, but also step out. And there's always new ideas flowing. Each cycle is governed by an executive team that is made up of me, another long-term volunteer, and then 2 new volunteers who were very active in the previous cycles. So that way people get to be leaders of the organization as well. It's not like they're just volunteering for someone else's organization. It's theirs too. But it's hard. I mean, running a volunteer focused organization is hard, and we realize those problems, especially as we wanted to do more and more things. It's hard to like have that accountability and like reliability, and it also means that only people who can afford that time are able to volunteer. So now we have staff. I myself was a volunteer until last year, and we got funding so that I can go full time. So we now have like a mixture of contractors and staff that all support the volunteers' work. So the volunteers are not there to support the staff are there to support the volunteers. So the power dynamics in the organization are very distributed. A volunteer that's unpaid could be managing a staff that is paid. They can both give each other tasks and work together with the same level of influence in the organization. So those are the kind of things that we've paid special attention to.
Yeah, that is really important since you have a mixture of different volunteers from different countries. So basically, you can have a different perspective on every issue because
Yep.
one culture has a different way of growing up one person. So it gives you different views, different opinions. So that's a really interesting way and very, uh, I think it's the right way to involve a lot of people from different places. And as you mentioned, you have a change of executive board seats from volunteers, and I believe that brings you new ideas that you further implement in CHAYM.
Yeah, and it's leadership sustainability. So I shouldn't be the only person in the team that is, getting to build the strategy for the organization. Everybody gets a chance to do that.
You're a true leader, not a boss.
Yeah, hope so.
So yeah, so we mentioned that you reached almost 400,000 people in the last 8 years, and it's really astonishing results for you and the CHAYM team. But these numbers and the statistics from the UN that claiming that 1 in 3 women experience some form of gender-based violence, as well as the estimation that women killed by intimate partners or family members account for more than half of all female homicides reported globally, are really truly terrifying. While the pandemic and the lockdowns are not making the situation better. So, what do you see as a long-term solution to the issue? Could education be the key answer to this?
Yes, I mean, patriarchy is the root problem, and it's not a new problem. It's been going for centuries. So the only way of, you know, taking this rot of out of our society is to take the whole root out, and that starts very young. That starts from education. It starts from having more equal houses, having conversations around consent, culture, gender norms. The fact that we're not just living in a world where someone's a man or a woman. There's like a whole gender spectrum, and the very strict moral values that are taught to people on what are supposedly two genders, which but really is much more fluid than that. Why those are harmful for everyone. So that matters. It matters that we look at our institutions, which are all largely made by men, run by men, and govern over issues that affect women. If you take Poland for an example, what a great example of how like key issues around women's health were being, if women had not organized, and like they had to do so much work to just get basic rights. And so these are all the kind of problematic areas. So we should work on people, but also systems that hold us back and are constrain our welfare. These are the things that we need to work on. We need to have a hard conversation with ourselves. So while we need to work on education for people, for the new generations, we're still alive, and we're able to create change on ourselves by reading up about things that we might not know about, and having difficult conversations with people around us on your WhatsApp groups, on your in your family, in your workplaces. What can we do to challenge these harmful norms around what women should do, what cannot do, how and challenge what healthy like relationships look like, what respect looks like. um, that's going to be the solution.
Yes, of course. I mean, I believe that we as young people actually make a difference in our parents' opinions. For example, we open discussions and we talk a lot on different issues. And I think I saw by my own example in my own family, I saw that there is like a opinion shift on different topics that they thought
Great.
of differently. So basically, I think that we as young people can make a real change, even when it comes to the older generations.
Absolutely. I mean, the youth is the future. It's one of those reasons where countries where the percentage of population, like there's more young people than like older people, you see a lot more innovation happening there because they're ready to embrace the future, create the future, and not be held down by how things were how things should be. So I think that bit's really important. We all have power to create, ripples of change, whether they be small or big.
Yes, definitely. While doing my research, I found out that you are an activist for different causes. And I would like to ask you, why do you think that activism is important, especially for the young people, since they're the they're the most important topic of this discussion?
I mean, I am an activist. I'm an activist because there are issues that affect, my life, the life of my pets, the life of my family members, people of my gender, people of my ethnicity, people around the world. And these are issues that I grew up feeling helpless about and powerless. And I feel like that's not if there are ways that I can exert power, be it in my family, be it in my friend circle, be it at my government level, be it in my organization, you know, I should be able to do that because these problems are so big that if like one or two people do something, it's like thinking that sometimes the approach we have to activism is like the approach we have to celebrities. We think, oh, this movie worked really well because the actors were great, but actually the movie is made up of like so many different people, the writers, the producers, the people who come to the sets, the costume designers, the music, the script writers, everything. Like there's so many different pegs in that system. So activism is like that. You may just know of some famous activists, but they're just like celebrities. They can do really good work, and they probably are doing a lot of work, but it's everybody else coming together and working on these issues is what's going to make the difference. Just a few voices don't. So we are, irrespective of how big your platform is, how big your impact is, the size of it doesn't really matter. What matters is how deep that impact is and how thoughtful you are in your activism, which means that being acknowledging that you cannot change everybody's opinion, acknowledging that they are having empathy for other people as well as yours, and finding a way to both either find common ground or at least fight your corner for the issues that are so important. I think it's hard work, and I think in the age of social media, a lot of it comes that people end up equating activism to opinions, and it's really not. It needs to be so much more about nuance in these issues. So I recommend everybody, all young people, to think of activism beyond social media. Social media is just a glimpse of like what people think, what people act, what people do. That's not where the real accountability and change is going to come. It's an important tool, but it's not everything.
And due to the pandemic, it is not really safe to organize massive gatherings. So we had to turn more to online activism. So do you think that this kind of activism is as important as the real one, as we already mentioned, like the physical one when we go on the streets and do something?
I mean, there
Or
are
also,
different ways to be an activist. Protests are just one way. I think anybody who says that protests are the only way that activism is done is wrong. There's so many different ways, whether it is like, starting your own organization, or within your organization being a change agent, whether it's like working in your town to change something. It does not have to be a protest or a demonstration. That can be a part of it. These are all different tools that we use to achieve the results that we want. And it matters not just about the tools and the end result, it also matters about the way we do it. So whether it's organizing online, creating spaces that are where people can come and share, learn from each other, and progress an issue, those are really as important as like 50,000 people having a hashtag and saying an opinion. So I think all of these tools work together to the bigger picture. All of my work is online, so I absolutely am like not diminishing the importance of online work. That's what I do as well. But my way of practicing the activism is of like working on CHAYM, but then amplifying the voices of people who go out and protest, amplifying the voices of people trying to change laws, amplifying people who are writing about their experiences, and like not making myself the center of the work, but making it about everybody who is doing the right thing.
so as my last question, I would like also, it is connected to the pandemic, to COVID. We noticed a serious spike in gender-based violence. So what would be your message to young people that are struggling with sexual harassment or gender-based violence at the moment?
I would say that I understand things can be hard and it may feel like there's not a lot of hope, but know that there are many other people like you in the same situation, and that while things may be bad right now, they don't have to always be like that. And there are ways of, exercising agency and power, even in situations where people try to take it away from you. So thinking of like yourself as your project of understanding, what are things that you like, what are things where it makes you can take back control in situations, practicing that, finding communities of care where people and solidarity of people who've in the same situation as you, meeting them, be that in person or online, and finding ways to be in places where it's not negative, it's positive, where people are practice care for each other. I think those are the things that will give you hope and joy in these times, and that, yeah, that you're not alone.
So now I would like to go and ask you questions that we got from the audience that are following us currently live. So the first question is from Marko Milutinovic, which is one of our colleagues, ambassador from the Young European Ambassadors. He's asking, are there any possible negative consequences of your activism? For example, abuse on social media or even, I don't know, a physical attack, in your opinion?
Yes, there are definitely risks attached to doing this kind of work. A lot of people feel threatened by people saying that women and like non-binary people have a right to exist and abuse free lives. So there is a lot of online abuse that comes our way. We also get a lot of well, what about men kind of comments, which is, doesn't really apply to Chen because all of our work is designed around women and non-binary people, but they're open to people of all genders. So anybody can go to our website and benefit from it. There's, no one stopping anybody. And it's all open source as well. So I actively encourage organizations that work with men to use our work and build on it, and collaborate with us. There's also a lot of, I think, this is in some cultures, people just don't like their family members to be working on this issue. It's really strange for me, but yeah, a lot of our volunteers have said that when they do work on Chen, their families either ignore it or any achievement in Chen, they disregard it. Whereas if they say, "Oh, I got a promotion at work," or I got some good feedback from my boss, and they work in a bank, their parents are so happy. But as soon as they mention that they got an opportunity to represent Chen at an event or speak or be on the news, the reaction is very different. So I think a lot of volunteers feel very desolate and demoralized by those attitudes. And then that's something I wasn't expecting when I started Chen, that this was going to be an experience that people involved with Chen would have.
I think it's the same situation in the Balkans, that this kind of volunteering and this kind of social entrepreneurship is not considered as real work, it's not considered as serious enough. So the parents and older generations are definitely looking at it in the same way as you explained. The second question would it be, what are the biggest challenges, advantages, and disadvantages of online activism in your opinion? It's from also one of our colleagues, Serjan from Serbia.
Good question. I mean, I've answered a little bit of that already, discussed like the limitations of online activism. I think the main thing I would say is that a lot of online activism is based around opinions, campaigns, which are very much like, we need this to change, do this to change, or sharing what's like, for example, particular incidents. So it dies down very quickly. So I think what we need is like a sustained effort, and often a lot of online activism it happens in silos. So something happens to someone starts a petition about it, or someone starts like a hashtag and people jump on. Then you have so many people typing in, which is great because it suddenly brings a lot of attention to an issue. But because it's completely removed from all the work that's happening on the ground by either like charities, lawmakers, academics, youth activists, like all that stuff that's happening, it's completely separate from it somehow. When it dies down, when all that dies down, politicians are no longer interested, news is no longer covering it. It doesn't help all the groundwork that was happening. So the disconnect is a big problem. I think if it's connected and people see how they can use that online power to connect with people who are trying to create change, that's when it becomes really powerful. And we've seen some really amazing examples of this. I mean, in Argentina is a great example of, and Chile, where like a lot of the online activism combined with all the protests and demonstrations and the petitions and the law changes that they were trying to make came together to create a really powerful force. I think in Ireland, same thing around reproductive health. That worked really well. Again, online and offline coming together, traditional, new, everybody working to the same goal. That's the kind of like coordination that would bring us the impact we're looking for.
Yeah, we can see that there are a lot of, it's not, I mean, the activism should be focused on the idea, as you mentioned already. It shouldn't be on the people or the smaller things that are done, but on the idea to fight for something. And in this kind of social media age, we can see that everything goes as a trend. So when something is trendy, a lot of people are covering it, as you mentioned. And after some time, when the trend goes off, then nobody talks about it. And yes, it's definitely important to have, in a way, a more sustainable solution to keep these kind of issues active during all times. And the last question would be from Sarah, also one of our colleagues from Macedonia. Does the power of the hashtag have enough power to reduce gender-based violence? Since
Absolutely not.
our title is the power of the hashtag.
Absolutely not. These are problems. These problems have gone on like since centuries. Yeah,
But we didn't have hashtags back then.
absolutely.
No
The
social
hashtag is
media.
not the reason. It's not going to stop. But it's a good question because I think when we talk about activism and online activism, it's almost like there's nothing else apart from hashtag, but that's not true. A lot like what CHAYM does is online activism, and we don't do any campaigning. We support other people's campaigns, but we don't do our own campaigns. What is our form of activism? We are pulling people together who've experienced pain and trauma. We're helping them recover and heal, but also creating community healing by creating resources that can help people who might be in countries where there's no safe option for them to access resources, or in countries where you can't trust the police or you don't want to go to the police, and or there's no organizations that are helping you, or like you might be a migrant or refugees in the Balkan states, right? And you want to access help in a way that you feel like you're not going to be judged and get help and support in your language and your culture. Then those are the people who are looking for help and not finding it. So providing help is a form of activism, and then also using their experiences to then feed that back to other parts of society, saying here are some critical gaps, we need to meet them, we need to change the way we talk about them. One of, I think, my biggest like pleasures from doing CHAYM is that I'm all about nuance and complexity. We often reduce people to like labels or like like very like shortcuts of what their experience is, and I'm all about like complicating it. So for me, I feel like that's like a big contribution that I make to the wider space, is by saying just because someone's a migrant, don't assume A, B, and C. They could be different, they could have multiple needs.
Yes.
And having that nuanced discussion. So in online activism, that's what I think is missing. It's the nuance and the connection with other parts of activism, work, research that's happening. So we've got to work together.
I got one more question. So the last question, the definitely last question for tonight is: do you think that the Me Too movement changed something recently for the better? It's from Ivan from Boston.
Absolutely. I think that's a really good example of of creating catalytic change, where the Me Too movement combined with Times Up. We know that it made a big impact on Hollywood, but then it also spurred lots of like conversations in different parts of the world, and triggered law changes. And I think even if we see no major change in accountability being our institutions changing, are people changing their behaviors, are people doing the work. It's very easy to say like, yes, I agree with women, hashtag me too, but it's harder to notice that your own behavior is sexist. That's the kind of accountability that we're looking for. Even if we've not been able to achieve that through the Me Too movement, um, it's what it is. It's given us a heading to organize around, and push each other and keep motivating each other. And at least now politicians and other kind of institutions in power know that they can't not address it, that they is important. So they may still like remain the way they are, but they know that they at least it will not be something that's just accepted. And I think it's the change in the acceptance of it, and saying that this is unacceptable and things have to change. That's what's changed. I've said change so many times in a sentence, apologies. That's made the difference.
Thank you very much, Hera, for you joining us today. Now we have the creative break, so I would invite you and our audience to take part in the creative break. And this time, I mean, for this creative break, we will present your platform actually, Chen, and talk more about how our viewers and how people can benefit from it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.